All right, so we are at the Christmas pageant now. And the shepherds have come out. And Imogen came out and she was burping the baby as if he had to burp. And Alice thought that was scandalous.
Why? Maybe all babies gotta burp.
Yeah, all babies have to burp. Whatever. All right, now I'm going to start back a little bit. Next came Gladys from behind the angel choir, pushing people out of the way and stepping on everybody's feet. Since Gladys was the only one in the pageant who had anything to say, she made the most of it. "Hey, unto you a child is born," she hollered, as if it was, for sure, the best news ever. And all the shepherds trembled, sure afraid of Gladys, mainly, but it looked good anyway. Then came 3 carols about angels. It took that long to get the angels in because they were all primary kids and they got nervous and cried and forgot where they were supposed to go and bent their wings in the door and things like that. We got a little rest then while the boys sang "We Three Kings of Orient Are," and everybody in the audience shifted around to watch the wise men march up the aisle. "What have they got?" Alice whispered. I didn't know, but whatever it was heavy. Leroy almost dropped it. He didn't have his frankincense jar either, and Claude and Ollie didn't have anything, although they were supposed to bring the gold and the myrrh.
No, just paper mache or something.
Yeah, just like fake boxes of it. "I knew this would happen," Alice said for the second time. "I bet it's something awful." "Like what?" "Like a burnt offering. You know the herdmans." "Well, they did burn things, but they hadn't burned this yet. It was a ham, and right away I knew where it came from. My father was on the church charitable works committee. They give away food baskets at Christmas, and this was the herdman's food basket ham. It still had the ribbon around it, saying Merry Christmas." "I'll bet they stole that," Alice said. "They did not. It came from their food basket, and if they want to give away their own ham, I guess they can do it. But even if the herdmans didn't like ham," that was Alice's next idea, "they had never before in their lives given away anything except lumps on the head. So you had to be impressed." So did the herdmans learn a little bit about giving? At least a little bit. They're giving away their Christmas ham to baby Jesus. Well, yeah. Leroy dropped the ham in front of the manger. It looked funny to see a ham there instead of fancy bath salt jars we always used for myrrh and frankincense. And they went and sat down on the other space on the only space that was left. While we sang "What Child Is This?" the wise men were supposed to confer among themselves. Thank you. The wise men were supposed to confer among themselves and then leave by a different door so everyone would understand that they were going home another way. Why were they going home another way?
Because they didn't want to have to pass the king wanted to kill
Because they
them.
didn't want to go by the king that wanted to kill them. But the herdmans forgot or didn't want to or something because they didn't confer and they didn't leave either. They just sat there and there wasn't anyone around who could do anything about it. "They're ruining the whole thing," Alice whispered, but they weren't at all. As a matter of fact, it made perfect sense for the wise men to sit down and rest, and I said so. They're supposed to have come a long way. You wouldn't expect them to just show up, hand over the ham, and leave. As for ruining the whole thing, it seemed to me that the herdmans had improved the pageant a lot, just by doing things that came naturally, like burping a baby, for instance, or thinking a ham would make a better present than a lot of perfumed oil. Usually, by the time we got to Silent Night, which was always the last carol, I was fed up with the whole thing and couldn't wait for it to be over. But it didn't feel that way this time. I almost wished for the pageant to go on, with the herdmans in charge, to see what else they would do different. Maybe the wise men would tell Mary about their problems with Herod, and she would tell them to go back and lie their heads off. Or Joseph might go with them and get rid of Herod once and for all. Or Joseph and Mary might ask the wise men to take the Christ child with them, figuring that no one would think to look there. I was so busy planning new ways to save the baby Jesus that I missed the beginning of Silent Night. But it was all right because everyone sang Silent Night, including the audience. We sang all the verses too, and when we got to Son of God Loves Pure Light, I happened to look at Imogene and I almost dropped my hymn book on a baby angel. Everyone had been waiting all this time for the Herdmans to do something absolutely unexpected. And sure enough, that was what happened. Imogen Herdman was crying. In the candlelight, her face was all shiny with tears, and she didn't even bother to wipe them away. She just sat there, awful old Imogen in her crooked veil, crying and crying and crying. Well, it was the best Christmas pageant we ever had. Everybody said so, but nobody seemed to know why. When it was over, people stood around the lobby of the church talking about what was different this year. There was something special, everyone said. They couldn't put their finger on it. Mrs. Wendelkin said, well, Mary, the mother of Jesus, had a black eye. That was something special, but only what you might expect. She added, she meant that it was the most natural thing in the world for a herdman to have a black eye. But actually, nobody hit Imogen, and she didn't hit anybody else. Her eye wasn't really black either, just puffy and swollen. She had walked into the corner of the choir robe cabinet in a kind of daze if she had just caught on to the idea of God and the wonder of Christmas. And this was the funny thing about it all. For years, I'd thought about the wonder of Christmas and the mystery of Jesus' birth and never really understood it. But now, because of the Herdmans, it didn't seem so mysterious after all. When Imogen had asked me what the pageant was about, I told her it was about Jesus. But that was just part of it. It was about a new baby and his mother and father who were in a lot of trouble. No money, no place to go, no doctor, nobody they knew. And then, arriving from the east, like my uncle from New Jersey, some rich friends. But Imogen, I guess, didn't see it that way. Christmas just came over her all at once, like a case of chills and fever. And so she was crying and walking into the furniture. Afterward, there were candy canes and little tiny testaments for everyone, and the poinsettia plants for my mother from the whole Sunday school. We put the costumes away and folded up the collapsible manger, and just before we left, my father snuffed out the last of the tall white candles. Guess that's everything, he said as we stood in the back of the church. All over now. It was quite a pageant. Then he looked at my mother. What's that you've got? It's the ham, she said. They wouldn't take it back. They wouldn't take any candy either, or any of the little Bibles. But Imogen did ask me for a set of the Bible story pictures, and she took out the Mary picture and said it was exactly right, whatever that means. I think it meant that no matter how she herself was, Imogen liked the idea of Mary in the picture, all pink and white and pure looking, as if she never washed the dishes or cooked supper or did anything at all except have Jesus on Christmas Eve. But as far as I'm concerned, Mary is always going to look a lot like Imogen Herdman, sort of nervous and bewildered, but ready to clobber anyone who laid a hand on her baby. And the wise men are always going to look like Leroy and his brothers bearing ham. When we came out of the church that night, it was cold and clear with crunchy snow underfoot and bright, bright stars overhead. And I thought about the angel of the Lord, Gladys, with her skinny legs and her dirty sneakers sticking out from under the robe, yelling at us all everywhere. Hey, unto you a child is born.